These are the 24 mental models of 8-figure teams, and they're responsible for something completely insane. Only 0.1% of businesses ever make it to $10 million per year in revenue. And I've done it not just once, but multiple times in multiple industries as a kid in his 20s. And when I've ignored just one of these 24, I literally lost $11 million. So if you can't listen for the next 5 minutes, you're probably not going to make it. So mental model number 1, ditch the mission and vision statement. Let people be radically selfish instead. This is the only way to get team members to care as much about your vision as they do their own. You see, people will never care as much about the company vision as they care about their own. Period. End of story. It is literally human nature, and we are not going to change that. So rather than trying to fight that, rather than trying to fight human nature, what we want to do instead is we want to actually harness it. We have to let people be greedy about their own wants and desires, and I'll explain what I mean here in a second. See, what we have to do first is we have to expand the company vision so it's big enough for theirs to fit within it. So many times as founders, what we do is we have this vision for the company that's only really big enough to fit our own personal vision inside of it. But if we want to have people who built their own 7, even 8-figure companies come work for us and be just as obsessed about the company vision as they were when they were working on their own, what do we have to do? We have to expand the company vision so that it's big enough for theirs to fit within it. Not just big enough for our own, but big enough for theirs to fit within it. All of them combined. And then what we need to do is we need to structure incentives in a way to where if they're obsessive about hitting their own personal goals, the company's vision is achieved as a byproduct. So the vision needs to be big enough for theirs to fit within it. And they need to feel like the only way they can hit their vision within it is that as a byproduct, the company achieves its goals as well. Now, mental model number 2 is machine mindset. This is why engineers are able to solve problems with such consistency, yet business owners will be stuck for literally years or even decades at the same revenue level. Have you ever thought about that? Like an engineer, when they're faced with a problem, almost every single time they're able to break through and solve it. But a business owner will stay stuck and they'll be on a hamster wheel, seemingly getting nowhere. And it's because of how they approach problems. Business owners approach them fundamentally different than engineers and even scientists would. And that's why they get different outcomes. So what we want to do is essentially take the scientific method approach to our businesses, right? We want to do what's called machine mindset. And this is how it works. You first have to have a massive vision. What is the goal? All right. And then you say, hey, based off of this goal, have we achieved it yet or not? And if we haven't achieved it, then the very first thing we're going to do before anything else is identify what is the biggest constraint in the business. What is the bottleneck where if we solve this problem, the business is able to grow? And once we've identified what that constraint is, then we're going to hypothesize a solution. We're going to test the solution, and we're going to look at the result. If the result worked, and then we go back up and we say, hey, all right, did we hit the goal? If we still haven't hit the goal, we say, what's the next biggest constraint? And we repeat that process. And if we test something and it doesn't work, then we go back and we take that feedback and we re-hypothesize another solution. And you only want to solve one constraint at a time, because when you're trying to solve for multiple variables, it's kind of like trying to solve a math equation. There's more than one variable. You can't do it. You need to get down to one variable. And when you're only solving for that one variable, and all you have to do is put all your life force and energy into solving one variable in the company, and you're testing methodically and looking at the results and re-hypothesizing, it's almost inevitable that you're going to solve a problem. Like, doesn't that make sense? Like the same way engineer or scientists test one thing and they keep testing until they solve it. If we take that same approach in business, then we're much more likely to actually get to the result. And this is something that we have to drill into all of our team members. Because most people, what they want to do is they want to do more stuff. They want to work on the next project, right? They want to come up with this new idea. But when we do more stuff, all that means is that there's more surface area. We do more stuff, there's going to be more problems. But if all we do is look at the business as a machine, and we say which piece of the machine can be improved the most, right? If I improve this piece, it's going to have more throughput in the company. And if we solve that, then the business scales. Then there's less problems and the business grows faster. And if you have your entire team operating this way and operating this way within each individual department that they're responsible for, then you have a really efficient team who's able to solve problems and make the machine go faster and further than if you're just doing a bunch of random stuff. And eventually you'll hit the goal and you'll say, hey, the goal is achieved. And then you raise the goal and you repeat this process all over again. Now, mental model number 3 is delete your to-do list and create a triage list instead. Now, in ERs, there's this concept of triage, right? So they don't treat people in the order that they come in, right? If someone comes in and they have a sprained ankle and they've been waiting there for 3 hours, and all of a sudden someone comes in and is having a heart attack, that person is going to get moved above the other one. And the reason they do this is because in the ER, it's life-threatening. And so for that reason, they have to approach how they get stuff done in a very, very strategic manner, or else people are literally going to die. But in business, we don't treat it this way. We have a massive to-do list and all sorts of stuff, and we don't actually know what is triage. So what we want to do is only work on what's at top of triage. We want to create just like delete our to-do list entirely and only work on the most needle-moving things in the company. And the way that we teach team members what's needle-moving and what's not is this equation. All right, this is how we determine triage. It's the cost of not doing it. So the consequences for not doing an item listed times the potential upside. Like if we do this, what is the upside this has for the company? Times the urgency. So is there a deadline? Not did we make up a deadline? Not, oh, I want this done by Thursday. But is there a real tangible deadline that this has to be done by over the time commitment? All right, so that's the impact per unit of time. That is the equation for what is most needle moving to work on. And the thing with time commitment is that something might not be as needle moving in terms of there's not a huge cost of doing it, not doing it. There's not huge potential upside, but like it takes very little time. So it's high value per unit of time. That's what we want to do. And we only want to work on things in order to triage. And a lot of times this means not doing stuff, right? This means letting things fall through the cracks to work on the most needle moving thing in the company, right? How much leverage we have as a business owner is based off of what we are working on. Not how much we're working, but what we are working on. And one of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to triaging is they don't know what the biggest constraint in their business is. And not knowing the biggest constraint in their business is kind of like a doctor not knowing what injuries are life-threatening and which ones aren't. So if you're in ER and you don't know that a heart attack can be life-threatening, you're going to triage incorrectly. And most business owners, they don't sit down and you haven't identified what the biggest constraint is. It really sat there and made sure this is for sure the biggest constraint in the business. And I've debated it and thought through it and played devil's advocate with it until I'm certain. And if you don't know what the biggest bottlenecks are, you're going to triage incorrectly. So the first step is sitting down, doing machine mindset, saying what is the biggest constraint. And if you figure out what the biggest constraint is, you'll notice so much stuff on the to-do list all of a sudden falls off, and it's very clear what triage is. That right? You can't triage if you don't know the biggest constraint. Period. End of story. And if you don't know the biggest constraint, you don't know what has the most potential upside. The other issue people make when it comes to triaging and making sure they're working on the most needle-moving thing is sunk cost bias. So sunk cost bias is kind of like continuing to help a guy in an ER. So a doctor's helping someone in an ER who has a sprained ankle, and then someone comes in with that heart attack. And the doctor goes, yeah, but I've been working on this sprained ankle for a long time. I really want to make sure I finish this up first so I can feel completed and done, and then I'll work on the gap with the heart attack. That's exactly what happens with sunk cost bias. And I know that sounds insane when you're talking about life-threatening situations. But this is what business owners do all the time. You have to be willing to be working on something for 6 months, and you realize all of a sudden, wow, there's something more needle moving, and you put that on the side, or even you ditch it completely, and you work on the highest triage thing, no matter how much you're invested in it with time or money on this previous thing. All right, so triaging, no matter what, like as if it's day one. Imagine you got dropped onto this planet, and you had no previous context about how much you invested, how much energy you put into it, and you said, what is the next best chess move? That is what we want to do. In fact, imagine you're playing chess. Your grandmaster's playing chess, and someone before them, who's a beginner, a complete novice, had this strategy. They're like, all right, here's my plan. Even though they had all this plan, they were doing all these moves based off of this plan. If a grandmaster took over their place, the grandmaster probably isn't going to go with their plan just because that was the plan. He's probably going to look at it from first principles and say, what is the next best move? What is the new plan? And in your business, you constantly have to be doing this every single day and ignoring what sunk cost bias you have. Otherwise, you will be trapped and you will spend 6 months, a year, 3 years going down a path because you've already put time into it. You've already put money into it. And it is not the best decision. You want to make the best decision, not the decision that feels the best because of all the invested time that we put into it. The other thing people do is when it comes to triage is they have ease bias. So a lot of times you work on the to-dos that are easy, right? The things that are just second nature for me. It's kind of like a doctor working on a patient who's easiest to treat rather than the guy with a heart attack. Maybe it's more complex. And then there's also incentive bias. So people will continue to work on things based off of what they enjoy doing. So this is like a doctor in an ER, and he has a patient and they have some rare injury that they really want to treat because they've never done it before and it sounds novel, new, and exciting. But again, the guy with the heart attack has to come first, even if it's routine and boring. Now, mental model number 4, why you should force your lowest level employees to argue with it. I know this sounds backwards, but I promise it makes sense. So the way most people treat ideas is like this. Person 1 has an idea and person 2 has an idea. And they'll argue it. And they take it very personally because they are internally attached to this idea that they have. They feel like this is my idea. And when we're arguing, if I'm wrong, then it's a personal attack on me. And really with this mental model, you want to separate ideas from people. And you want every idea, regardless of who it comes from, right? If it's the boss or if it's the newest guy on the team, they need to be put out on a table and observed independently of who came up with them. And the logic of the ideas needs to be debated rigorously. You want it to where people are debating as hard as you possibly can to figure out what is right, not who is right. And this is a very difficult thing for team members to understand, and especially for leaders to understand, because they feel like people are questioning their authority by arguing with them. And I want to encourage you, if you have a team, to encourage them to argue with you, because it's not about you being right. It's about the best idea winning. And if your idea is not strong enough for its logic to hold up on its own, independent of who came up with it, then it is not the right idea, right? So we want to encourage a culture of debating everything, right? I say argue, but really it's debating everything and making sure that if we all have this long-term vision where the only way we can achieve our personal visions is if the long-term company vision is achieved, that we're making sure we're picking the best ideas, we're doing the right actions, and we don't care who came up with them, right? I don't care if the guy who literally just came on the team is right and I'm wrong. Like there have been plenty of times where we hire someone new and I have an idea and I encourage them to say, hey, what do you think is a better way to approach this? Or what do you think is wrong about how I'm thinking about this? And I concede it to them. Even though they're brand new on the team, they don't have nearly as much context. Now it's rare, a lot of times, you have more context, so you're able to make better decisions. You have stronger ideas that have stronger logic, but it doesn't matter who came up with it, period, end of story, right? Everything should be debated. And I mean, literally everything should be debated. What the constraint is should be debated. How we're triaging every single person on the team should be debated. Who, just literally anything and everything in the company should be debated, and you should encourage people to debate. You should force people to debate. Most people do not want to debate. They do not want to do it. It takes energy. It is exhausting. So you have to sit there and say, hey, what do you disagree with about this? How do you think we're going about this wrong? Asking open-ended questions where they have to give you an answer. And a lot of times team members will be like, oh, I don't know. And you have to wait. But if you did know, what do you think is wrong with this? Or what do you think would be a better approach? Where do you think we're going to die so we never go there? And you want to debate everything. Literally, you should never punish someone on your team for challenging someone in authority, right? It should always be what's the best logic and always conceding when the best logic is presented, right? And you really have to make an effort to concede where you see that you're wrong. That way you encourage this as a culture. If you're always saying, oh, anyone can debate anything, but they're never able to win in the debate, eventually people give up. And the moment people go, all right, there's no point in arguing, you have lost. Like you have lost fundamentally. So you have to say, you know what, I think you're right in this area. I think you're wrong in this area. Here's my logic, X, Y, Z. And you really got to debate it. But the biggest thing is seniority and tenure should have zero factor on the debate, other than they may have more sound logic and evidence to back up their points. The ideas might be stronger, and that's why they're in positions of authority, because they are better at coming up with good ideas. But it should never be because they say so. The answer, because I said so, is poison to a team, right? If you want a team where eventually they run without you, where they're able to make good decisions and solve problems without you, they have to be highly, highly autonomous, to where they are fully vested in the company and they're not just a yes man. You don't want yes man employees. Like with where AI is getting, like pretty soon, if you just have yes man employees, you just have AI do everything. But you want team members who are actively seeking out new problems and solving problems on their own and coming up with solutions and thinking through them. And the only way you get that is by allowing the best ideas to win, allowing people to debate, allowing people to challenge, to where they feel ownership, right? If you look at property rights and the way that human beings behave, if you give someone a house for free, and they've done this, what happens is they just don't take care of the house because they don't feel like they own it, or they don't feel any ownership of it. But the moment someone owns a property, all of a sudden they start taking care of it 100 times better. Now, why is that? It's because they have a sense of control over it. They feel like this is mine. And when people don't feel like they can come up with ideas, and if their ideas are solid, they're going to win, then it's kind of like the person who rents the house, but just maybe they got it for free and they just don't care about it. But the moment it becomes about the idea and the best idea wins, now people are invested. They feel a sense of ownership. They feel control of the outcome. And if you want high level 7, 8-figure people to come work for you, they need to feel in control of the outcome. Because in order for them to achieve their vision, the company's vision has to be achieved. And if they don't feel like they have any say over the company achieving it, then they're just going to go do their own thing. Right? You need to give them ownership over it. If you don't do that, they're not going to perform as well. They're not going to care nearly as much. And it's just not going to work as a whole. People must never concede out of convenience either. That is the other thing. So many times, people just give up in the middle of debating. And it's not because their logic's wrong, but it's because they're just tired of debating. They're just like, oh, fine, we'll do it your way. And that can never be acceptable on a team, right? The better idea has to win, not the person with the most persistence. And so what you'll notice is on a team, you'll see people give up and you have to call it out and force them to keep debating. So if you see Johnny on the team go, you know what, fine, we'll just do it that way. You got to go, no, Johnny, this is not about who's right. It's about what's the best idea. And I can tell that you're not convicted in this. Let's sit down and let's lay out the logic until the best logic wins. And you need to constantly reinforce this behavior because it is against human nature to want to just keep debating stuff, right? So you really have to draw this out of people. And so many times I've told this to other owners of companies and they're like, I don't want to do that. We're just going to spend the whole day arguing. No one's ever going to get anything done. But I promise you, it is extremely difficult to get people to debate everything. So you have to be extreme about it. And however extreme you are, it's going to be a little bit less. So you really, really have to encourage this behavior. All right, mental model number 5. Encourage your team members to be offensive. Again, this one sounds counterintuitive as well, but I promise it'll make sense. Now, Elon says that one of the greatest weaknesses of the CEO is the desire to be liked. And this goes not only for the CEO, but for everyone on the team. In a high-performing team, the truth has to be greater than any individual's feelings. And you have to instill this in the entire team to value the truth over everything. Because if we're going towards a long-term vision, right, and the only way for everyone in the team to accomplish their personal visions is for us to hit that, then the feelings shouldn't matter. All that should matter is the truth and operate at the highest level possible in order to hit that. Like, you cannot be just caring about feelings over the truth. Because if you do that, they're not going to get there. And therefore, every single person's vision is not accomplished. So you have to articulate this to the team of, hey, if we want to get to this vision, the truth has to be senior to any of our individual feelings. And sometimes it's going to hurt our feelings the way that you have to communicate. But that doesn't matter because we all care about the vision more, right? And you have to get people to buy in and be bought in on this concept and really just hammer it in over and over and over. And what you have to do is adopt radical transparency. So that's what I mean by being offensive. But radically transparent doesn't mean that we're just being a dick to each other. It's not the purpose of it. It's valuing the truth over feelings, like I said. So it's not setting easier expectations because people's feelings, you don't want to offend them. You don't want to be like, like the work's solid. It's good. Like, you want to be radically transparent about what it's going to take to win. Like, hey, this is what's going to be required. We're going to have to be obsessive as a team if we're going to hit this vision. You're going to have to work X amount of hours. You're going to have to do X, Y, Z. You just can't sugarcoat the expectations. So many times on teams, we just sugarcoat everything. Like, what we really want in terms of the outcome of maybe, let's say you're talking to a video editor, is some crazy result. But rather than doing that, like, oh, that's hard, he's probably going to fall short. We're like, oh yeah, like, just do the best you can. It's like, no, set unbelievably high expectations. Be radically transparent about what you expect, what you want. Do not settle for less because you don't think someone's capable of it. And there should be no unspoken feelings. So when someone comes back after setting these crazy high expectations and it's below standard, the answer is not like, yeah, like, you did a good job. The answer is, this isn't up to standard. Go back and try it again. And this is what I mean by being offensive. And that hurts people's feelings. If you're not a part of a team that communicates that we behave this way, but it is the only way to get stuff done. Like, if you look at Steve Jobs would go into a marketing meeting and they would have been working on a campaign for weeks, for months, 6 months even. And they show him it and he'll go, this is shit. Try again. Like, we can do better than this. This is shit. And it sounds super harsh, but the people who were like closest to Steve, they didn't take it with the same offensiveness that everyone talks about Steve Jobs with. They just understood that Steve was telling exactly how he felt at all moments, and he was never sugarcoating it. Because of that, although it might have hurt some people's feelings, it was wildly more effective and got the most out of people, right? There was never anyone who was like, I wonder what Steve Jobs thinks of me. You knew what Steve Jobs thought of you. Like, he would be in meetings, there's stories of him and Johnny Ive, and he'd be like, you're an A player, you're a B player, you're a D player, you're a C player. And he would just tell people how he felt about it. And I know that sounds extremely harsh, and obviously different people want to take that to different levels. But if you look at Steve Jobs, you look at Elon Musk, a lot of the greats have this in common, right? And a lot of people, they hate on him for it. They say it's way too harsh. But it's hard to argue with the fact that Elon has built, what is it, like 7 multi-decade billion-dollar companies. And Steve Jobs built one of the largest companies in history. It's like, it works. Like, you look at a lot of the greatest CEOs, they do this. And you really have to communicate to the team why you're doing it. It's not to be a dick. And you need to encourage people to do it back to you. If it's only one way, it doesn't work. So you have to force people to give you and others radical transparency and positively reinforce when they do. So like, you have to sit there and say, hey, what do you think about this? And if you sense that someone doesn't actually feel good about this person's work, you need to encourage them and tell them how they actually feel. Or if they say something to you behind the scenes where it's like, hey, I mean, so-and-so's work, they're really falling behind. Sit there and say, hey, pick up the phone and call them and let them know how you feel. And you have to sit there and train people to be radically transparent. What most people are afraid of is they're going to be like, I'm going to tell my team to do this, and everyone's just going to start being just a jerk to each other. But there's so much programming in us as humans, as like a tribal, animal, and we don't like saying mean stuff to each other. And so it's very hard to start valuing the truth over individuals' feelings just because of human nature, right? And so when you have a high-performing team, you really need to foster this of anytime you see unspoken feelings, encouraging them to say to the other person. And when you do, reminding them that this isn't being mean. This is, we all want to achieve this vision more than we care about our own individual feelings, right? And they're like, yeah, 100%. And so for that reason, like, tell them how you actually feel about this. If you don't feel like it's up to standard, you got to let them know. Like, well, yeah, honestly, I feel like you really nailed it in here. And this goes for everyone in the company. Like, you should allow the newest person on the team to be able to be so radically transparent with you as the owner or anyone above them that they could say, hey, I'll be honest, I feel like you're falling behind. I feel like, what you're working on isn't triage right now. I feel like you're distracted. Like, they should be able to just be raw and brutal to someone way higher up than them. And the person way higher up than them might disagree, and then they can debate the logic of what they're doing. But it needs to be that brutal. Now, again, getting team members to do that, I promise you, no matter how much you encourage it, it's extremely, extremely difficult. But the closer you can get to that standard, the more effective the team's going to be. Because unspoken feelings are like rust in a machine, right? It builds up all this gunk, and the machine doesn't work as efficiently because there's all these unspoken feelings. And so the more stuff is just out in the open, everyone knows where everyone stands with each other. Everyone knows how everyone feels about everyone's work. There is nothing that is ambiguous, the more effective the team will be. Now, mental model number 6, optimize to infinity. Now, most people forget this part of the framework. What happens is, they achieve a goal, right? Or whatever the goal is. It might be a micro goal, it might be a macro goal. And once they hit it, they kind of just stop, right? What they do is they stop optimizing when they no longer see low-hanging fruit. So they'll get to a place in the business where, their lead cost is pretty good. And then their show rate is pretty good. And then their, close rate is pretty good. Their cash collector rate is pretty good. And they get rid of all the low-hanging fruit. They solve all the obvious stuff. And then they just stop optimizing. They literally don't continue optimizing. And yes, we want to find exponential jumps where there's like these super low-hanging fruit or these super obvious things we can do. But what we never want to do is we never want to stop with incremental improvement. We want constant, never-ending improvement on the biggest bottleneck in the company. And so sometimes you don't know what the biggest bottleneck is. You're like, I don't know what the next solution is. But you have to pick what the biggest constraint is, and you just have to figure out how you can improve it a little bit, right? Small changes, they compound exponentially. If you get a 10% change over here, and a 10% change over here, and a 5% change over here, those compound exponentially. It's not just 10%, 5%, 5%. It's 10% on top of where you were, 5% on top of that 10%, 3% on top of that 15%. And so it compounds exponentially. And so you can't have a team that ever settles, right? You never, ever, 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 ever want to go into maintenance mode as a company. Like companies by nature, there's entropy. The bigger you get, the more you scale, stuff becomes less efficient. So if we're not optimizing to infinity, we're not staying in a flat line. Stuff is getting worse. There is no such thing as maintaining. You're either growing or your company is going backwards. And so you have to have the team in a place where they're constantly trying to figure out how to get the next improvement. They're looking for the incremental improvements and the exponential improvements. And if you really think about it, this is how anything great has been accomplished. If you look at how computers have evolved to where they are today, we used to be at a place where a computer took up an entire room and it had like 3 megabytes on it of data. And now we literally have talking sand. We have computers that are so powerful. We literally have genius level IQ when we talk to a computer, and it fits in the palm of our hand. And it's not because we got to a certain point where we're like, all right, this is good enough. It's because engineers constantly are trying to improve it. That's why we have Moore's law, because it compounds exponentially. We're growing exponentially in terms of computing power. And so you want your business to be the same way. You want it to be growing exponentially in terms of every single little metric, and they all compound. And if you're not doing this obsessively, then you're going to fall behind as a company, or you're not going to be able to scale. Like, stuff only gets harder. Ad costs will go up next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, right? Building, your personal brand, your social media, whatever, it's going to get more crowded next year, and next year, and the year after that. Like, stuff always gets harder. So the sooner we can take this approach of just Kaizen, which is constant, never-ending improvement, the better. Like when they were rebuilding Japan after World War II, there was this mentality of Kaizen, and they rebuilt extremely fast. And all that Kaizen was constant, never-ending improvement. Right? Don't even worry about this whole big picture. Just do the next thing in front of us. How do we improve it a little bit? And that's why they were able to rebuild as fast as they were. Mental model number 7. Stop trying to retain talent and instead repel it. This is the only way to have world-class people on your team and retain them. Now, Amazon has a policy where they will literally pay you to quit and resign voluntarily. So they'll pay you $5,000 to quit. They encourage people to quit, and they'll pay you $5,000 if you do so. And Elon Musk had a similar policy when he was, when Twitter was at its worst, when they were like in this mode where they had to fix everything, and tons of employees had already left. Elon sent out this email where he was encouraging engineers to quit, and he was giving them basically paying them to quit if they weren't fully bought in, if they weren't just like on board with this radical culture that he wanted to build. So like while they literally needed engineers, Elon sending out an email, repelling them, telling them to quit, telling them if you're not bought into this crazy culture, encouraging them to quit. And many of them did. So why are they doing this? Well, everyone knows you need A-player talent on a team. But how do you actually get it? How do you have world-class people who are on a team? Now, what we need to do is we need to make it very clear what an A player on our team is, and we need to actively convince people to leave the team if they don't think they can hit that standard. No sugarcoating it. So we want A players who are extremely talented, who are obsessive, like people who are radically obsessive, where they feel like this is their life mission. They're just obsessed. And every single waking hour, even if they're not working, they're thinking about work. They're thinking about how to make the machine better. They're just obsessives. Like, you probably met some obsessive people in your life. Maybe you're one of them. Like, you want those people on your team, and you want 100% of the team to be like that. And you want them to embody the mentals. And you have to set the standard. This is what we want. This is the level of obsession that we expect. And anything less than this, not only are we just like, oh, well, we don't want that on the team, we're going to actively repel it. We're going to say, hey, if you can't commit to this unbelievable standard, then you're gone. Right? We don't want you on the team. Like, we will pay you to quit, as Elon was offering, as Jeff Bezos was offering. And the reason why is because when you set this standard, it's not enough to just have it, because if you just have this standard, like this is what we want, then you have people who are all along that scale. We're all kind of obsessed, a little bit obsessed, and you're like trying to figure out where to draw the line. And when you're recruiting people, a lot of times you're like trying to sugarcoat it. You're like, hey, yeah, like we're a great company. We don't make you work too hard. We've got great good work-life balance. We got all this stuff. It's not going to chew this, but we're trying to make it easier to recruit people. But the best people want to be a part of an obsessive team. They want a team that has this vision where theirs can fit what's inside of it, and they can just go all out. This can become their life's work. Like Elon talks about how at XAI, or his new AI company, he literally had people who'd worked for, I think the whole team had worked for 2 months straight without a single weekend, and they don't require that. Like, just people were so obsessed, they didn't want to take time off work. And I'm not telling to make it a standard that you have to have people work 7 days a week. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is you have to set a clear line in the sand of what an A player is, and anything below that, you have to actively repel. It's not enough to just say, hey, this is what we want. You have to say, if you are not this, we don't want you here. And that means literally sitting down with people like, hey, this is what we expect. I don't think it's a good fit for you. Like, maybe you should leave unless this is something that you're going to commit to. And the more options you give someone to leave, and the more times they say, no, this is where I want to be, they're self-selecting, the more bought in they become. So people are so afraid to sit down with a team member and be like, this is what we expect. If you're not able to meet this, we don't want you here. They're afraid to do that because they're afraid people are going to leave. And the truth is they're right. But only the right people are leaving. The best people, the A players, that doesn't repel them. That makes them more bought in. Like that line in the sand moment, they might go from being, a B, C player, but they have the talent, the raw talent of an A player. And the moment you say, hey, this is what we expect. You're now part of Alabama football. Now they go, all right, I'm committing. I'm going all in. But you need to give them a decision. Most people out of companies, it's just lukewarm. They're just kind of there. There is no defining moment. There's no catalyst where they're like, I am making a decision to not leave and actively say I'm going all in. And so you have to give this decision to every single person on the team, and not just once, but repeatedly. Remind me, like, you can leave. And the more they say, no, I want to be here. I want to give my life to this, the more effective that team is going to be. Right? You have a football team, and there are people who just feel life is football. They're like, I am all in. I want to get part of Alabama football. I know it's harder than all the other teams. I know I have to be more obsessed. I know there's going to be a higher level of excellence and standard that is required. But I am deciding to sacrifice other things in my life to be here. And the more that decision is given to people in front of them, and the more they make that decision, the more bought in they are going to be. So I'm sorry I'm harping on this, but this is unbelievably important if you want A players. Because you can have A players on the team, but if you don't draw this line in the sand, they never have that moment to step up and become them. A company should not be a family. It should be more like a sports team. This is something that Reed Hastings, one of the founders of Netflix, says. And that's just so incredibly true. It's not a family. It's not like, oh, John's the personality hire. We like him. He's not that great. Or he's not, that hard of a worker, but we like John. It's like, no. This is a sports team. If you were looking at your team as a sports team, who would you pick? Right? If you were, even think about it when you're back in elementary school and you had to pick teams. Are you picking these people? Right? Would you pick them to be on your team? Winning was the life or death. Like you're like, hey, we're about to win a championship. That the consequence of not winning is literally death. Would you pick the person? And if the answer is no, then they shouldn't be on the team. And if the answer is they're talented enough, but they're not bought in, well, that's why we draw that line in the sand and say, hey, this is what we expect. Maybe this isn't a good fit for you. And make them self-select to say, no, I'm making the decision to be bought in. I'm making the decision to step away that line and step into my potential. Now, there needs to be zero fear of uncertainty around job positions if they're in that first bucket, if they are all the way bought in. But if they are not in that first bucket, right, they're not all the way obsessed, all the way bought in, embodying the mental models of the company, there needs to be certainty that they're going to be let go. Like most companies, the only way you get let go is if you commit a fireable offense. So people are just kind of there and they're just hanging them out. We don't want that. If you're on a sports team, it's not enough to just show up to practice. You have to be a top performer or you're going to get traded. And so it needs to be the exact same way on your team, or else you're just going to have a bunch of lukewarm people. And the AAA players do not want to be around that, right? They don't even realize it a lot of times. But the moment you start making a hard line in the sand and you start letting go of people, and people know, oh, I got to step over this line where I'm 100% certain I'm going to be let go, you'll be amazed at the level of talent that just emerges on your team, right? And if you don't do that, then it will never happen. You will never have those A players. And even if you have the A players on the team, they're never going to be fully bought in. Mental model number 8, avoiding the trap of tragedy of the commons. This is what makes teams so inefficient. It's what makes them not be able to get stuff done. Now imagine you have 4 workers that are tasked with mowing lawn. Now, just stay with me for a second on this analogy. Now, if it gets done well, who gets the credit? Well, they all did. The team gets the credit. And if it gets done poorly, who is to blame? Well, no one, because everyone did it. So it's just like the whole team, they kind of fell short at mowing this lawn. The benefit is distributed and the blame is distributed. So for that reason, there's no individual incentive to perform at a super high level. Right? It's just distributed blame, distributed reward. And so it's just a lukewarm. There is no upside, there is no downside. But now, what if we divide it into 4 separate pieces of land and we assign one person for each segment? Then what happens? Right? Who has the benefit? Who gets the reward for their segment? They do, right? And who gets the consequence if their segment of land isn't done well? They do. Like, we've concentrated all the upside and we've also concentrated all the downside. So now they have this internal pressure where they're like, man, I need to perform because this is the thing that I am responsible for, right? And this comes from basically property rights, like I talked about earlier. When people own a property, they have this internal feeling where I need to take care of this property. This is my property. I have ownership over this. I bear the consequences. I bear the upside of this environment. So I'm going to take care of it. And this is why societies function as well as they do, is because of property rights. And so now, if we do that same concept and we apply it to building companies, and we make it to where every single person is clearly responsible for this thing or this thing, and they get all the praise if things go well, and they get all the blame if things don't. And this does two things. Number one, people work dramatically harder. They have way more obsession. They have way more attention to detail. They care more because they have ownership over it. This is my reputation on the line. And also, now it becomes easy to see the B players. Because you don't have a scenario where everyone's to blame, you know who is to blame. When segment 3 gets done very poorly, you're like, wow, Bob is a B player. We probably should let go of Bob, right? And it makes it way easier to manage people because you're able to have conversations about the quality of their work because they are responsible for an outcome, right? Now, by having the benefit and the blame focus on every individual of the outcome, the decisions that make along the way, it aligns the human incentives to get the most out of people, right? It makes it to where the incentives are aligned. And when people aren't behaving how we want, it usually comes back to incentives. And incentives doesn't just mean having a big shiny carrot at the end of a job, right? What it also means is making sure that there's all these human psychological factors are aligned as well. Now, Peter Thiel had a famous statement called "one person, one problem." It was a framework that he used with PayPal. And this is what he took the approach to get people to perform. And he was so maniacal about the one problem, one person, that people would get frustrated. People would go into Peter Thiel's office and be like, hey, I have this idea for this thing. He'd be like, no. Tell me about your plot of land, right? In this analogy. The one thing that I assigned to you, the one problem that you're responsible for. All I care about is that outcome. And he made it to where not only did he separate the work to one person is responsible for this, but one person was only responsible for one thing. That was the only thing that they were responsible for. And it makes it really easy to determine who's an A player, who's not. And also, there's so much pressure. When one person is responsible for one outcome, there's so much pressure. Like, if this doesn't get done well, what does this say about me and where I stand on the team? And so, if we take this approach in business, you'll be amazed at how much more effective your teams become. Like, we literally could not have done the things we've done without approaching it this way. It's like, hey, you're responsible for this, you're responsible for this. Mental model number 9, radical curiosity. Now, I want you to imagine this. If you were playing a game of chess and you only saw some of the pieces on the board, could you make a good decision? So like, you only saw a little segment of the board. Could you make the best next move? Well, in business, a lot of times, this is what we're doing when we try to make decisions. When we try to make decisions without all of the context, it's like trying to move a piece on the board without seeing the full thing. So what you have to do, the only defense against this is asking tons of questions because we don't know what we don't know. And this especially goes for team members on a large team or even a small team. So you have to ask a lot of questions to get all of the context to make sure you see all the pieces on the board before you make a decision. So the way we do this is we teach team members to be radically curious, right? Not only do they learn faster, not only do they grow up more, but they're able to make better decisions when they have all the context. So this means in meetings, when you're talking to other people in other divisions, you should be radically curious, asking as many questions as you possibly can, because you want all the pieces to be visible to where you're able to make the best decision. So this means notebooks out every single meeting, asking questions. And if you are at least slightly annoying about the amount of questions you're asking, then you aren't being curious enough. And this is what we tell team members, like, hey, I'm not annoyed by how many questions you're asking, which means you're not asking enough. And this means you're like, hey, what type of questions? Literally everything. Like literally anything and everything you can think of. Like, let their curiosity just run wild. You want people to be like asking questions about how you think is the founder, why you believe this is the vision, why, we do this for this process. Why we do everything should be why. Like, you know, when you're hanging out with a little kid and maybe you're babysitting your niece or nephew and they're just like, why? So many times you're just like, dude, shut up already. And it's like, that's the approach we want. We want team members to be saying why as much as little kids. Because when they do that, they end up having way more context over time and they make way better decisions and they learn more as a byproduct. Mental model number 10. Well-run meetings will ruin your business. Now, here's what I mean. Jeff Bezos says that he actively tries to make meetings as messy as possible, and we strive to do the same. And what do I mean by messy? See, the purpose of a meeting is for debating and brainstorming only. If you have updates, send the Google Doc, send a Slack message, do a quick Loom. Like, a meeting is not there so everyone can sit there and present and everyone can listen. That is a waste of time. The only purpose of a meeting should be debating ideas or brainstorming ideas, right? Debating, hey, how we're making this decision, brainstorming, whatever. But it should be a very, very, as Jeff Bezos says, messy environment where you're debating things. If you were just sitting there talking about, this is what we're doing, and everyone goes, yay, waste of time. Why are you there? That is not top of triage, period, end of story. People waste countless hours by mistaking meetings for productivity. If there is no disagreement, then there is no meeting, right? You're simply wasting time. Now, the other thing about meetings is when you have team members there, you need to be able to call that out. Like, you should be able to say, hey, this is a waste of time. Hey, is there anything else we need to cover? Because this is a waste of time. And low-level team members should be able to do this in every single meeting. Like, you should be able to have the newest guy on the team be like, hey guys, I don't feel like this is productive. We're just talking in circles. No one's debating anything. Why are we here? Like, Elon has it in a policy where people are literally allowed to just walk out of meetings if it's not relevant to them. Like, we do not want to be wasting time in meetings. Like, if you look at every single person that you're paying on an hourly basis, even if it's salary, and you say, hey, all these people here, let's say they get paid $50 an hour on average. You have 10 people in a meeting. Well, that's $500 an hour that you're just wasting. And if you're not debating, if you're not solving things, then you're just wasting time, and you're also wasting money, literally. All right, mental model number 11. Why trying to improve your company often makes it worse. This is a mistake I've seen so many business owners make, and they have no idea they're even making it. And it's kind of like when you're playing a video game if there were no checkpoints. Now, when trying to improve the machine, what they do is they identify what the constraint is, which is good. They hypothesize a solution. They test that solution. And sometimes, which is the majority of the time, that test does not work. It does not solve the problem. And rather than reverting to the control and going back to baseline, what they do instead is they make another version of this fail test. And that one doesn't work. Or maybe it works a little bit better, but not as good as the original control. And they do another version and another version. And pretty soon, they're 6 versions off from where they started. And this seems like a mistake that you wouldn't make, but most business owners make it without even realizing it. Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who has a business. They do probably like around $1 million a year. They're not crazy big. And he was telling me his numbers, and they were all messed up. They were completely broken. His ROAS had tanked dramatically. Close rate was down. Everything was just broken. I'm like, hey, what changed from now versus 6 months ago? He's like, oh, it's basically everything's the same. And when we actually dove into it, his funnel was different. His headline was different. Like, the total angle, how he was approaching it was different. What was it? His setting process was different. Like, there was like 5 different variables that were different. And the reason why is because he tried one thing, it didn't quite work. And he's like, oh, well, maybe if I do this thing plus this thing, and this thing plus this thing. And pretty soon you're like 7 variations off, and you don't even realize that you lost the checkpoint. And so what we need to do instead is when something doesn't work, all we need to do is go back to where we're working, get baseline, make sure we have those metrics and they're still working, make sure that the baseline is exactly what we were doing before, and then we hypothesize a new solution based off the feedback from that test. We test it, and we see how it works. And you only want to test that one variable time to where we can revert to the control, to where we have this like safety checkpoint that we hold sacred until we beat it, and we find something better, and we now that is the control going forward. So one of the biggest mistakes is just not reverting to the control, not keeping the control sacred. And it's something that you have to constantly remind yourself, or else you'll end up tweaking the headline, and that doesn't quite make it better. Be like, hey, what if we tweak the headline and we make the button say this, and we do this, and make sure that you know what the control is at all times. You document it. You know exactly what it is. In the moment a test fails, go back to control, and then you do the new test and run against the control. Don't run the new test against the previous test, right? Run the new test against the control. It sounds simple, but I promise you just making this one thing will help you not be on this treadmill where like you're playing whack-a-mole, where you're like going forward and backward, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. It makes everything so much more consistent, predictable, and you're steadily making your way towards the goal rather than sometimes going backwards without even realizing it. Now, mental model number 12. Start by being lazy about problem solving. Now, I know it sounds backwards, but I promise you it works. Now, the first thing most people say when it comes to solving a problem in the business is, how do I solve this? I want you to get rid of that entirely from your vocabulary until you've done this first. What you need to ask is, who has already solved this? It's a much easier question than figuring out how to solve it from scratch. And they don't have to be in your industry, it can be in any industry. Who has already solved this problem? You see, very few problems in this world have not been solved before, right? Good artists copy, great artists steal, as Pablo Picasso says. And business isn't like school, right? We don't get in trouble for cheating. In fact, we get rewarded for it, right? We just go out there, we find the answer that someone's already figured out, and we copy it exactly. And a lot of times it's like, no one's figured this out. I promise you, if you ask around enough and you have enough connections and you start reaching out to them and say, hey, who do you know that has solved this problem? Almost always, someone has already figured it out. They've already done 500 tests to figure out where they are at, to figure out the winning solution. And rather than having to go through those 500 tests yourself, you can start at the winning solution and improve upon it, right? So the way we do this is we literally say, all right, this is the constraint in the business that we're trying to solve. Everyone in leadership, get out your phones, text everyone that you know saying, who do you know that has already solved insert whatever the problem is. And have everyone do it. Literally everyone has to text them. Everyone they know in the industry or any industry say, hey, this is the problem that we're dealing with. Who do you know that has solved it? And that is the key word. It's not, do you know how to solve it? Who do you know that has already solved it? There's the whole 6 degrees of separation. We're 6 degrees of separation away from everyone in the world. That's the proven study that they've done. So if we sit there, we message everyone we know, say, hey, who do you know that has solved this problem? Usually you're going to get back an answer. And they'll introduce you to someone, you talk to that person, and maybe they didn't actually solve it, but then you ask that person, hey, who do you know that has solved it? Or who do you know that is even better than you at this? And we want to find those solutions. We want to go treasure hunting for solutions in the business, right? Every single time we can pick up this new treasure, the business grows and without us having to go through the costly trial and error. Like, failed tests cost the company money. You're not making the money that you could be making if you had the proven solution sooner. Like Elon used to tell the team, every day that we're not at $10 million a day in revenue, we are losing $10 million a day. So he would do extreme things to increase revenue. He would, like, even when they were on a crazy budget, he would fly a private jet to get this one part to do this thing to improve by 3 days, because if every day costs us $10 million, that we're not at $10 million a day. And so by not implementing these solutions, by trying to just figure it out and you're like, oh, I'll get there eventually, you are losing money. Even if not literally, you're losing it in the opportunity cost of just taking the proven solution, implementing it in the business, right? Model what works, innovate later, right? And the other thing is just have the eye research it for you. Not only should you ask people, you say, hey, Claude, research this problem. This is what I'm trying to solve. Do deep research and figure out who's already solved this. What are industry best practices in a bunch of different industries? And a lot of times there's benchmark solutions for almost any problem in different industries, even if they're not in your own. So literally stop asking, how do I solve this? And first become lazy. Who has already solved this? What was it? Bill Gates, he had this philosophy where he always would pick the lazy person to do the job because they'll find an easier way to get it done. And this is very much that. Like, you want to be lazy at first to get the winning solution that you're going to base your testing off of. But once you get that winning solution, now you can get creative. So implement the proven solution first before you innovate on top of it. Be lazy at first, figure out who's already solved it, test all the winning solutions first before you come up with your own. Mentor model number 12. Why your lowest level employees often have the best solutions. You see, most companies operate from a very much a top-down approach, right? They have this approach where I am the boss, I am the leader, and therefore I know best. This is the solution that we're going to try. And it's all my ideas filtering down. But the most effective companies operate bottom up, right? They get their best ideas from the people on the front lines. See, there's a reason why Elon Musk spends more time on the factory floors than he does in the boardroom with a bunch of executives, right? He's literally on the front lines. He's the richest, first of all, he's literally worth $1 trillion, $800 billion time filming this or whatever it is. And he is on the factory lines all the time with the lowest level workers who most companies would literally just disregard what they think. They're low level, they don't need anything. And it's because the closer you can be to the problem, often the more context that you're going to have, the better insights that you're going to have to what the actual best solution is, right? When you're on the front lines, like for example, your sales reps, your setters who are on the phone, they have more context about what people are saying than you do, unless you're actually listening to the calls. In that case, you're literally on the front lines with them. So you want to get as close to the problem as possible, and you want that information to filter up, not top-down approach, bottom up. So before trying to solve any problem, gather as much context as possible from those people on those front lines before even hypothesizing a solution. Ask an insane amount of questions to them. Like most people, they are Matt Carey, Scott, they're lowest level workers on the team. They're like, dude, they're just the low level guys. Like, no. They have some of the best insight. They are the closest to the customers. They are the closest to the prospects. They're the closest to the problems, right? Like literally ask the people who are the closest to the problems and let that information flow up, right? The more context you have, the more knowledge that you have, the better decisions that you're going to make, the better hypotheses that you're going to make. So therefore, the less tests it takes to get to the winning solution. Now, mental model number 17, first principles thinking. Why listening to the experts will keep you stuck. Now, most people stall on improving the machine because there's an invisible force that stops them from making 10x improvements on what they already have. And that invisible force is the status quo. So many times, yes, benchmarking is good. Yes, we want to do the best already proven solution first. But a lot of times we get stuck in this paradigm of thinking of like, this is the way it's always been done. Like if you look at a lot of industries that have been truly disrupted, they're usually disrupted from outsiders. Because when you have this lens on, like this is how things are supposed to be done, you stop thinking from first principles. You stop going back to the atoms. And so you want to go back to just what are the first principle truths, and you want to get rid of your assumptions, literally get rid of every assumption that you have about how you're approaching the problem. And then we want to break it down to its most universal truths, and then we want to reason from the ground up without external influence. Just think from first principles. Like just think, all right, knowing what I know about this human psychology, what I know about, the actual physics of what the constraints are that we're trying to solve, whatever problem, and just say, what is the best possible solution? Never accept just, we always done it this way, so let's not question it. Now, obviously, we want to benchmark first, but once we have that baseline, then we want to think from first principles, right? Ask why is it done this way? Why do we need to do this? Why does this piece need to exist? Does this piece need to exist at all? And just reason from first principles to try and solve the problem, right? Mental model number 13, why people usually aren't to blame for bad behavior and performance. And this sounds completely counterintuitive, and every manager's like, no, but people are to blame for the bad performance. And it's always the people. It's the people. We need better players, A players on the team. And that is true, but not always. You see, in the Soviet Union, what they did is they wanted to produce a lot of nails. They needed a lot of nails. And so what they did is they incentivized people based off of how many pounds of nails they could produce. And they're thinking, man, if we incentivize people based off of this, we're going to get a lot of nails, and this is going to solve our nail shortage problem. But what do you think happened? Well, they got giant nails that were completely unusable, like 5-10 pound nails that literally you could not use for anything. And the reason why is because of perverse incentives. The incentive was based off of the weight of the nails, not the quality of what you want a nail to be, right? And so the incentive was the reason that the behavior was bad, is because they literally incentivized the wrong thing. And usually human beings will take incentives to their extreme. Incentives always get exploited because human beings have a lot of incentive bias. And we'll tend to, frankly, as human beings, people will bend their morals, they'll bend this, and they'll justify their way out of it in order to get towards that incentive. Like Warren Buffett said, ants go where the sugar lies. And the sooner you understand this, and the sooner you stop just expecting people to do what they should do, and the sooner you just accept they're going to do whatever the incentives are telling them to do, the more effective of a manager that you're going to be, the more effective you're going to be able to build teams. Because when stuff's not going the right way, rather than going like, I have all these people, I don't know how to get them to do what they want, all you have to do is put on the lens of, how do I structure incentives to get the behavior I want? When incentives are structured correctly, you don't need to be like doing lots of one-on-ones and trying to like convince people to behave a certain way. Like all you need to do is say, all right, they're not doing what I want. What are the incentives now? How do I structure it in a way where I'm going to basically put the sugar where I want the ants to go? Right? You get better performance than just one-on-ones, pips, and all that stuff. Like literally just setting good incentives does all the managing for you. Right? If you set good enough incentives and you have 8 players on a team, the team just self-manages. You don't got to be like Mr. Charisma walking around telling, hyping everybody up. Like You just have to set good incentives. If you can just get that one piece right on the business, I promise you the team can run hyper efficiently without being a quote unquote good manager. Now, instead of incentives, what you want to do is think through what is the desired behavior that I want and what is the best way to set the incentives so that when taken to the extreme, it still aligns with the outcome I want. So the closer the incentives can be aligned to what I want, like my incentives as the owner of the company, the closer they're aligned, usually the more effective the incentives are going to be. So for example, in the case of the nails, doing it based off the weight of the nails, that is not the actual solution. You need to have a clear definition of what qualifies as a nail and then do the weight. So now you have those two metrics back to back where it's like, how much pounds of nails can you produce that meet these qualifications, and you only get paid on the ones that meet these qualifications. Now all of a sudden you get people producing a lot of nails and they're high quality nails because they have to meet the qualification in order for them to hit their incentives. Incentives should be set and forget. Like most people, what they do is they structure a team and they figure out what the incentives are and they never touch it again. It's like, all right, these are the incentives for the team. Incentives should be consistently reevaluated, tweaked, and tested. Incentives are a part of your machine. In the business, incentive is a massive component of what makes the business work. So you should always be looking at say, hey, where are we not getting the behavior we want? All right, the first thing we're blaming is the incentives. That is the first thing we're blaming. And we're testing, hey, what if we structure incentives this way? And you test it and you see how it grows. And if it works, great, keep it at your new baseline. If it doesn't, revert it back to what the incentives were before, make a new hypothesis, and then test it again. And so you really need to treat incentives like a very fluid thing. Like I am constantly trying to change the incentives of the company to make it work more efficient. What you do not want is you do not want just random bonuses attached to nothing. At most companies, people give out bonuses like a teacher giving out candy to their favorite student rather than a tool to get people to behave the way we want. Like if we want the business to scale without us to where like if we step away for a month or two and the business is still growing, I promise you, you're not going to get there if the incentives are not aligned, right? If you do not have people who are aligned in the same direction, all moving in the path that you want to get to the desired outcome, it's not going to happen. Elon Musk talks about a company as the alignment of a bunch of vectors. So like every single person in the company is a vector. And the closer you can get them all pointing the right direction, the more effective the company is going to be, the faster it's going to get to where the destination is. And so the way we point those vectors in that same direction is making sure that incentives are aligned and we have the right people on the boat. Now, mental model number 14, like your life depends on it, chunking. When faced with life or death situations, people will do anything to survive. Biologically, we are built for survival. And our brain gets into a different gear when we genuinely feel like our survival is on the line. So what we found the most effective way for figuring out how to compress timelines, for getting things done in a short period of time, is relentlessly asking ourselves and team members. And again, this is going to sound super extreme, super harsh, so the team members have to understand where you're coming from when you say this, and that you're not just like threatening them. But we say, if your life depended on it, if your family's life depended on it, like meaning you are literally going to die. Like imagine you are literally going to die if we do not accomplish this objective as fast as humanly possible. How would we approach it? What would we do? And when you do this and you put people into that frame, all of a sudden it goes from them just doing the status quo, like, oh, I'm going to do this. They kick into gear and they start thinking through things from a first principles level. If my life is on the line, my kids' lives are on the line, my wife's life is on the line, how will I approach this to get this done in the fastest time possible? And you start chunking down, like, all right, I would do this, I would do this, I would not do this, I would skip this part. Just that one question alone, if your life depends on it, will have team members find solutions they didn't know exists. They will find ways to do stuff 10 times faster than they've ever done it before. And they'll approach stuff with a different level of paradigm and intensity that they never would approach it without this question being asked. And we ask this question all the time. And our team members know that we don't actually mean it. But when you sit there and you simulate it, your brain imagining a situation has the same effect on the brain as actually going through it, if you imagine it vividly. And so when we have team members sit there and just visualize, like, hey, what would I do? This is the situation. I mean, how would I approach this? They approach it completely differently. So when you're in meetings with your team, even if it's just you, you're just asking yourself this question, or you and a business partner, or even you have 50, 100 employees, literally ask this question on repeat and make people visualize it and think through it. And eventually, if you do this enough, they start to ask themselves this question. And when that happens, that's when your team becomes hyper effective. Right? We keep challenging and chunking And when they give us the answer, like, hey, this is how I would do it if my life depended on it, we keep challenging and chunking out each piece. Like, if your life depended on this is how you do this piece, all right, how could you do this a little bit? How could you do this even more effectively? Like, how could you do this even faster? We chunk down every single individual piece. So when they say, if my life depended on it, this would be my path, we say, all right, go to step 1 of the path, break down that. If your life depended on it, we keep doing it over and over. If your life is really dependent, how can you do this piece more effectively? How can you do this piece faster? And they usually will figure out how to start compressing the timeline. They start chunking. And the reason why it's called life dependent on it chunking is because if you just ask the question, a lot of times they don't think through all the details still. So you have to like go down every single step and component that they're planning on achieving the objective and literally just keep chunking. If your life depended on this piece, this piece, this piece, how would you do it faster? How would you do it better? How would you get it done in a shorter timeline? And the next piece, you keep repeating over and over and over. And again, you do this enough, team members train themselves to do this without being prompted. Right? So the same way you sit there and you prompt ChatGPT to get the result that you want, really working with team members is the exact same way. If you prompt it differently, you give it extreme prompts, the same way AI performs better with extreme prompts, human beings do as well. And the prompt of like your life depends on it is one of the most effective ones for human beings, period, end of story. Mental model number 15, Parkinson's law. Now, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. That is Parkinson's law. So after doing like your life dependent on it chunking with a team member, what we do is we get that fastest time humanly possible. We say, this is the fastest possible time you can do it if your life depended on it. Now we set extremely aggressive and hard deadlines and get people to commit to operating like your life depends on hitting it. Right, so it's one thing to say, this is how I would do it, but then just having no deadline. But by having Parkinson's law on top and saying, this is the fastest that is humanly possible, now, are you going to stake your reputation on it getting done by this date? And you make them set a really aggressive timeline and put their reputation on the line if they're going to hit it. Now, if you and the team aren't missing 50% of the deadlines you're setting, you're not being aggressive enough with the timeline. This is Elon's internal metric, not mine. This is Elon Musk's internal metric for setting deadlines. If you're not missing 50%, they are not aggressive enough. Elon assembled a GPU cluster that was supposed to take 4 years. Right? Jensen literally said any team who would do the same thing would take 4 years for them to do. His team did it in 19 days. And the reason why is because he does like you like depending on the chunking. He probably called it something different, but he figures out what's the fastest first principles based way of approaching this. And then he sets hard deadlines. And Elon misses a lot of deadlines. He is made fun of in the public for missing all the deadlines that he sets. But guess what? Elon is worth $1 trillion, right? He started, I think 6 multi-billion-dollar companies from scratch. PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, XAI. He also had X, like unbelievable amounts of productivity. And he's okay with missing 50% of the deadlines because it's much better to be over a deadline than it is to be, hitting your deadlines every single time, because that means you're just not being aggressive with those deadlines. And people use the size of a company as an excuse for moving slow, but it's typically just internal people who prefer comfort. The bigger you get, the more you have people fighting back against aggressive timelines, not because it's against the laws of physics, but because they like their job to be cushier, right? They like it to be easier. So no matter how big your company gets, you have to fight back against aggressive timelines. Elon is a much bigger company than me or you or anyone watching. I mean, he's the richest person on the planet, and he still fights for unrealistic deadlines, and he still hits them. Mental model number 16, speaking of Elon's algorithm for efficiency. Now, Elon developed this simple 5-step framework for avoiding mistakes, moving faster, and being more time and resource efficient, and it's plastered on all the walls of all of his offices. And this is something that we teach our team members internally. And here's how it goes. Step number 1, make the requirements less known. Right? So look at everything that you're doing. Do you actually need to do it? Is this actually necessary? The most productive thing you can do is not make things more efficient or better. It's remove parts, right? Remove parts, simplify. And then we're at step number 2, delete those parts. So once we identify how we can make it less dumb, we delete the part of the process, right? That step. Step 3, once we've simplified it, then we optimize the individual steps. Step 4, then we accelerate. And step 5, then we automate. Most people are trying to automate systems and processes, and they're trying to automate stuff before they've done the first 4 steps. So we need to do the first 4 steps first. Mental model number 17, measuring progress in hours and days rather than in quarters. Now, we banned 2 words from every company that we've ever operated. And those two words are next quarter, right? Anyone on the team is measuring based off of next quarter, next, whatever, it is way too long, right? We never tolerate someone saying next quarter, even next month, really. These terms mean that they haven't chunked down to the first principles of how fast it actually takes to get the task done, as if their life depended on it. If their life depended on it, almost nothing's taking tell next quarter, right? And you should estimate down to the day. It should be next quarter. It should be like, it's going to take 73 days. Like, you want to chunk down every single piece to how long you think the fastest unit of time to accomplish this piece, and then this piece, and this piece. And when you add them all together, how many days is that? That's how we want to measure progress, right? Elon would measure car production output daily. And if numbers were even low for a single day, he would go 911 mode on the factory floor to solve it. So we want to just chunk everything down to first principles and say, hey, how fast can we get done? Even just changing from the terminology end of week or end of month to end of day or even end of hour, you're going to get a lot more done. Like when a team member says, I need to get this done, like, hey, can you get this done for me in the next 20 minutes, the next hour? The faster you can make those timelines, Parkinson's law comes into play. So like the best way to take advantage of Parkinson's law of time or of work filling the time allocated for it is just to set tighter timelines, right? Just to say end of day or end of hour instead of next month, next quarter. Usually stuff doesn't take that long. Like quarter is just a subjective, random thing. So it's just like how many days it's going to take. Go to first principles of what's the fastest time possible and set the deadline. And if you miss it 50% of the time, that means you're setting deadlines correctly. We even eliminated the concept of a calendar year. A lot of people are like, in this year where it is, they're talking about January through December. But if you were just dropped on this planet today, right, there's no such thing as this calendar year, next calendar. It's just 1 year from today, 1 month from today, 1 week from today. And so getting rid of the paradigm of like these calendar years, like obviously there's some stuff we literally have to think about it that way. But for the most part, when it comes to actually being productive and accomplishing stuff, getting rid of that paradigm makes it to where people are just thinking about what's the fastest time frame possible to get this done. I'm not thinking about the years like these chunks. I'm thinking about it. I got dropped on the planet today. First principles, what's the best way to get this done in the shortest time frame possible? Mentor model number 18, rapid iteration over the grand plan. Now, it's not the smartest or the strongest who survive. It's the most adaptable to change. You can't think your way out. You can't think your way to the right answers. Right? You need to test your way there. Right? You want to take an approach of evolution towards a goal rather than trying to get it all right from the beginning. Like so many times, what people do when they're launching a new product, when they're doing anything new, is they try to figure out everything to begin with. So they're looking at the machine, they try to figure out every single piece, and it all has to be right, and they have to make sure every single piece is right before they test stuff. And the problem with having this grand plan, where like, I'm gonna do all this stuff and then put it out in the world and see if it works, is you waste so much time before getting any feedback. Like what you wanna do instead is, the moment pieces are ready for testing, test them as soon as possible, and then iterate based off of them. Like you don't need to be the smartest, you just need to be the most adaptable to change. When you get feedback that, this didn't work, let's tweak it. Rather than doing all this back-end work on stuff where, it all goes to waste. So you want minimum viable on cast and then just rapidly innovate. Because the time it takes to get to perfect takes away from that actual time of just being able to test and get your way there. Mentor model number 19, no rigid chain of command. Anyone should be allowed to contact anyone in the company to accomplish their objective, and they can skip the chain of command to do so. Elon made this a policy that anyone at his companies can and should contact anyone at any level of the department without having to go through any chain of command whatsoever, right? Whenever is the most efficient way to get it done is how you should encourage team members to get the thing done. So many bosses, they don't like the idea of being able to skip them in the chain of command because it takes away their power, their authority. And that's what like managers love. Like managers love feeling like they are a gatekeeper. And although it makes things messier, having it to where people can contact whoever, the company becomes more efficient. Because rather than having to wait for this guy to get to this guy to get to this guy to approve stuff, it's literally just one step, right? Although it takes more, effort from higher up people to be able to like work with people, that is how you should approach it. Because people, what you don't want is you don't want them to check out. You want people who are like all the way bought in. They feel like they have control of the outcome. And the moment they have this roadblock of, I got to ask this guy, who's got to ask this guy, who's got to ask this guy, there's just this lack of control. When there's lack of control, people check out and they don't feel responsible for the outcome as much as they do when it's fully in their control. So what you need to do is simply make it to where people can go to anyone in the company to accomplish their goal, right? Whatever that is, whatever their domain that they're assigned is, say, hey, this is the outcome that you're responsible for, and you're allowed to do whatever it takes in order to get there, as long as you don't infringe on other people's decision rights, as long as you don't infringe on other people's property, the problems that they're responsible for. And, if it affects them, now you have a conversation with them and debate it and make the best idea win, and then go from there. But anyone can and should contact anyone in order to achieve the outcome that they're responsible for. There should be zero middlemen in the company at any point in time. Middlemen bureaucracy is just a waste of time. Moving fast again is chaotic and uncomfortable, but the alternative is moving slow, and that is the death sentence to any company, period. Mentor model number 20. Don't believe everything you think. Now, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett were fascinated with this concept of why do smart people so often make obviously bad decisions. They looked at it time and time again, and they noticed this pattern that kept happening. And the fact of the matter is, our brain has a set of shortcuts it uses to reduce cognitive load. Charlie Munger coined them the 25 cognitive biases. And the thing about these 25 cognitive biases is they're basically a heuristic. They're a shortcut that allows us to they're programmed into us to basically make decisions that are not based off of sound logic, but based off of just, it's a heuristic, like authority bias. Like someone authority said so I'm going to do this. Oh, other people are doing it, so I'm going to do it. It's just programmed into us through thousands of years of evolution. And when we rely on these, when we allow these to cloud our judgment, what happens is they dramatically fatigue our decision-making process. They make it to where our decision-making is very poor. Sometimes they serve us because, again, it reduces cognitive load. If we got to think about every little decision we ever make, that's a lot. But with important decisions, these cognitive biases cause fatal mistakes. Like there have been times when individual biases have literally cost me just ungodly amounts of money, right? Mistakes, things I didn't foresee, things that I was overconfident in because of my biases, where I had incentive bias in one area that led to dramatic mistakes. And so these cognitive biases, they need to be studied, and you need to understand what every single one of them are, and you need to have your team understand what every single one of these cognitive biases are. So what we did is we print out all the cognitive biases and we give them to all our team members, and we have them learn every single one of the 25 cognitive biases. And we constantly look out for these biases in ourselves and our team members in everything that we do. So if we're in a meeting and someone says something and they're like arguing the point, like, hey, I think you have incentive bias when it comes to this. Or they're debating something and they're saying, hey, I think you have authority bias because of this. And so we'll literally go through, we'll just call people out for whatever cognitive bias we think that they are experiencing, to where they become self-aware and they're self-reflecting on it. We should be doing this to ourselves, but especially in a team environment. Like everyone should call them out, because it is hard to see your own biases. They're biases for a reason. You don't think you have them. So if you have an important decision, if you literally get out the biases and you look through them and say, hey, for each one of these, am I having this bias cloud my judgment? And the more that you understand what the biases are, and the more you call yourself out, and the more you call other people out, the more effective the team will be at decision-making and avoiding mistakes. Mental model number 21, two-way doors versus one-way door decisions. So there's two types of decisions. This is something that Jeff Bezos taught at Amazon that allowed him to make really fast decisions and move quickly while avoiding catastrophic mistakes. So the two types of doors are this. The first one is a two-way door. And these are decisions that are reversible. They're low to moderate risk, and they're easy to undo. And then if you have a decision like this in a company, where it's reversible, easy to undo, it's low risk, you should make these decisions extremely quickly. They shouldn't be debated for a long period of time. They shouldn't be procrastinated on. Just make it as quick as possible. Even the wrong decision, make the decision as fast as humanly possible. And then based off of the output, then you can just say, hey, we need to redo a different decision. You undo it, and you do the next one. But this is very much like the whole rapid iteration over the grand plan. People sit there, they're trying to make the right decision. They think through everything. When the fastest way to make the right decision is to make any decision, see the feedback, and then adjust accordingly. And then the other type of decision holds a lot more weight. These are one-way door decisions. These are decisions that are irreversible, meaning once you go through this door, there is no going back. It is a solidified decision that is going to have massive consequences, good or bad. And these decisions should be made very slowly. very deliberately. You should get out your 25 cognitive biases and make sure for every single one of them, you've thought through it, sleep on it, have your teammates, debate it rigorously, try to figure out where you're wrong, think about where you're going to die so you never go there, and just really make sure that you're making a slow, correct decision. And these two types of decisions, before you make a decision, say, hey, which type of decision is this? Is this a one-way door decision? Or is this a two-way door decision? First type, or the one-way door decisions, make very slowly. The two-way door decisions, make them very quickly, because there is way more downside in waiting. Right? You can make 10 decisions, and it's true, we make the best possible decision based off a bunch of different feedback versus waiting and having this decision and it doesn't work out. But on the one-way door decisions, again, you should really take your time on this. Mental model number 22, disagree and commit. Now, what happens when two smart people in a company have equally good logic on whatever they're debating and they completely disagree? How do you actually resolve that? Well, when there's no clear right answer, meaning no person's logic is obviously superior, what are we going to do left to decide? We're going to go with the person who has the most merit and previous track record on whatever domain they're disagreeing on. Right, so whoever has the most merit, like, hey, this person has historically made the most good decisions in this area. They have the most experience in this area. Even if the logic's equally good, we're going to go with their idea because they have the most merit. Right? They have the best track record. They have almost like intuition that other person might not have. But once you commit, so you might disagree, you're going to disagree and you're going to commit. Once you commit, everyone should get behind it and monitor the experiment closely until reality plays out. There should be no, oh, I told you your idea was yours. It's like, no. We're disagreeing. We're going to commit to this idea. We're all behind this idea. There is no blame for the outcome. We came to this decision together, and we're going to see how it plays out, and we're going to adjust accordingly. Now, along way door decisions, we want to make sure that the logic is really sound and we've really thought through it. And if this person feels very much against this idea, you should sit there and debate it for a very long time until you are certain that this is the best idea, or you just are at a standstill and you're going to go with the person who has the most track record of making these decisions. For example, if you as the owner of the company have run multiple very successful companies and you have your logic for how you're going to run the sales process, and someone new on the team has very good logic, but it pretty equal logic to you, but there's no real winner, you're going to go with your output because this is just a new guy. Now, versus maybe you're the owner of the company, but this other hire that you had maybe has built 10 sales floors to 100 plus reps. And even though your logic's equal and you're higher up in the company, he has more merit on that domain than just you as the founder of the company. So you go with his opinion and you disagree with him and you commit to his decision. And it's not like, fine, we'll do your idea. It's like, I disagree with you, but I think you have more track record on this. So we're going to go with your idea. I'm going to commit to it and we'll see how it goes. Mental model number 23, praise people for bad outcomes. Now, let me ask you this. Would investing your life savings into Bitcoin in 2010 been a good or a bad decision? Well, as much as it sounds like it'd be a good decision, what it would really be is it would be a bad decision with a good outcome. And there's a lot of things like this in business. Good outcomes don't always mean good decisions, right? Good decisions don't always mean good outcomes either. So let's say you're given these two options. Option A, a 90% chance at $100,000, but a 10% chance at making nothing, or a 50% chance at making $1 million and a 50% chance at making nothing. Which is the better option to choose, given that you don't desperately need the money? Well, the option B has a $500,000 expected value, and option A only has a $90,000 expected value. Now, if a team member picked this, if they pick option B and it resulted in $0, that 50% chance, would it have been a good decision or a bad decision? Well, it would have been a good decision with a bad outcome. But because most companies just look at the outcomes people have, right? They look at the outcomes that employees get, team members get. Employees revert to making the safe decisions with the highest expected value for them personally, rather than the highest expected value for the company as a whole. And this is something you really have to watch out for, right? Ants go where the sugar lies. Where is the incentive? For them, it going wrong could be a catastrophic mistake for them because they made nothing rather than making the $90,000. And so they take the safe decision rather than the best decision. So bad outcomes can sometimes lead to good decisions. And what we want to do is we want to praise these publicly, right? So bad outcomes can come from good decisions. We want to praise these publicly. So someone makes a good decision that resulted in a bad outcome. We want to say, hey, John, this is the decision you made. You want to say this in front of everybody. John, this is your logic. I think the logic was super sound. It didn't work out. That was the best decision you could have made. You want to publicly reward them for people like, wow, they were really pumped about John making this decision that resulted in a very bad outcome because the decision-making was good. The logic was good. And for that reason, you want to publicly praise it so that you don't get a situation where they're taking safe decisions, right? You have to teach team members about expected value and say, hey, we want to make the highest expected value decisions in all scenarios, regardless of the outcome. And then good outcomes, but bad decision-making processes, we want to condemn publicly. If someone invested their life savings in Bitcoin in 2010, when you have no certainty that's going to go up, but it is highly risky, you don't want to reward that behavior. You want to be like, hey, I know this resulted in this good outcome, but like that was bad decision-making. We made this decision. I think it was extremely risky and it did not make any sense. And you want to punish that behavior publicly. And when you have the incentives, which part of incentive is how the manager behaves, how they reward and punish people publicly. And so there's positive incentive for making good decisions, even when they lead to bad outcomes. And there's no negative downside for the bad outcomes if the decision-making was good. And there is negative consequence for good outcomes, but poorly made decisions. Then the team members will start to make decisions in that manner. But if you're not publicly expressing this and publicly talking about this, you will always get the safe decision-making process, the one that leads to their job being safest, not the best decision for the company. Mental model number 24, how to actually predict the future. Now, Elon Musk says the definition of intelligence is how accurately you can predict the future. Now, how do you actually do that? Now, for every decision, what you need to do is you need to ask this. What variables does this decision affect? Right? What people does this touch? What other segments of the business is it going to affect? What are the second order and third order consequences of this decision? What are the variables that it's going to touch? And for each of those variables, think through the potential consequences and think through them as a set of probabilities. So like, all right, it's going to affect this department. It's going to affect this thing. Here's how it's going to affect lead quality. And think through what are the potential second and third order consequences of each of those variables, right? So it's like if I'm playing chess and I take this piece, what are all the new potential things that could happen? And what is the probability of each of those things happening based off of how this person's playing? And the more you can do that with all your decisions, you're like simulate it in your brain. All right, these are the second and third order consequences I think are going to happen. Here's the ones that I think are high probability, lower probability. And the more accurate you can get at that, yourself and your team members, the better decisions you are going to make. And so the more you can sit down with team members and do this, and you get them to predict the second and third order consequences, and the more you can reflect back and say, hey, this is what we predicted. This is what happened. How close are we? Where were we wrong? And the more you can train that feedback loop, the more effective you're going to be at predicting the future, right? At making good decisions that lead to good second and third order consequences. So the way you do this is you sit down with the team and you map this out on paper. Here's our hypothesis of what's going to happen. Here's what happens. Here's our hypothesis. And over time, you're going to train this muscle and you're going to get better at predicting human psychology. You're going to get better at predicting all sorts of different things just purely based off of that feedback loop. Most people can't predict the future because they never actually practice it, right? They never sit down and they never map out what do they think are the second and third order consequences of the decision that they're making. But the more you do this and the more you reflect back and say, hey, where was I wrong? Why was I wrong? The more effective you're going to get. Now, are you going to be able to predict perfectly? Absolutely not. But you're going to get a lot more effective, right? That's one of the reasons Elon's able to have as much success so consistently at such a large scale is because he is very good at predicting the second and third order consequences of the decisions that he makes.